Commander Vexus of the Krell Dominion leaned back in his command throne, all four of his eyes gleaming with what could only be described as predatory delight. Oh, this was going to be good. This was going to be very, very good. Tactical Officer Brennix, tell me what I am looking at, Vexus said, though he already knew. He just wanted to hear someone else say it out loud so he could savor the moment properly. Brennix, a younger Krell with barely 3 cycles of military service, tapped at his console with trembling claws. Sir, long-range sensors have detected a human vessel. Classification appears to be non-military. Coordinates locked at grid 79 Alpha. Non-military, Vexus repeated, his mandibles clicking together in what passed for a crow laugh. Show me visual. The main viewport flickered to life, and there it was. Floating in the black void of space like the galaxy's most obvious target was a massive human vessel. And when Vexus said massive, he meant ridiculously, stupidly, insultingly massive. The thing was easily twice the size of his own warship, the Talon of Dominance. But size was not what made Vexus nearly fall out of his command throne with glee. No. What made this absolutely perfect was the color. The ship was white, bright, gleaming, pristine white, as if someone had taken the concept of surrender and turned it into a spacecraft, and painted across its hull, visible even from this distance, were massive red symbols, crosses, medical crosses, the universal symbol for healing, mercy, and complete and utter defenselessness. By the 7 moons of Krell Prime, Vexus whispered, then broke into full-throated laughter. They actually did it. The humans actually sent a hospital ship into contested space. A hospital ship. His bridge crew joined in the laughter, though some sounded more nervous than amused. Brennix cleared his throat. Sir, according to human maritime law, which extends to their space vessels, hospital ships are protected under something they call the Geneva Convention. Firing upon medical vessels is considered a war crime, and a war crime, Vexus interrupted, wiping moisture from his primary eyes. Brennix, my young naive officer, do you see any human warships nearby? Do you see any witnesses? Do you see anyone who is going to report this so-called war crime? Brennix's scales flushed a darker shade of green. No, sir. Sensors show we are alone in this sector. Exactly. Vexus slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. And besides, everyone knows humans are soft, weak. They probably filled that oversized medical barge with their wounded from the recent skirmish at Proxima Station, helpless little mammals floating around, trusting in their precious conventions and treaties to protect them. He stood up, stretching to his full height of nearly 8 feet. Weapons Officer Kelth, charge forward plasma banks. Let us send these humans a message about the value of their treaties in the real galaxy. Kelth, a grizzled veteran with scars across his snout, hesitated. Sir, if I may, there are stories about humans, about what happens when you back them into corners, about their capacity for what? Vexus snapped. Bleeding, crying, writing strongly worded diplomatic protests. That is a hospital ship, Kelth. It is unarmed. It is defenseless. It is, and I cannot stress this enough, the easiest target we will ever encounter in our entire military careers. Kelth's claws hovered over his consoles. Still, sir, perhaps a warning hail would be. Oh, we will give them a warning, Vexus said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. We will give them a warning shot, right across their bow, and when they realize how utterly doomed they are, when they start begging and pleading in that whiny human way, then we will blow them out of the stars and claim we thought they were a military vessel. Fog of war and all that. He settled back into his throne, savoring the moment. Fire when ready. Weapons Officer, let us see how quickly humans abandon their principles when faced with actual consequences. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of charging weapons. On the viewport, the massive white hospital ship continued its slow, peaceful trajectory, completely unaware of the death sentence that had just been pronounced upon it. Or so Vexus thought. Oh, how magnificently, spectacularly wrong he was about to be. The first plasma bolt screamed across the void, a brilliant lance of superheated energy that should have been impossible to miss. Vexus watched with satisfaction as it crossed the hospital ship's bow close enough to make any sane captain soil themselves. Nothing happened. The white vessel continued on its trajectory, serene and unbothered, as if someone had just knocked politely on a door and received no answer. Huh, Vexus said, leaning forward. Communications Officer Thexal, are they hailing us? Begging for mercy? Offering surrender? Thexal, a female Krell with excellent hearing ridges, shook her head. No incoming transmission, sir. Nothing. Not even emergency broadcasts. Maybe they did not see it. Brenix offered weakly. Vexus's laugh was sharp and cruel. Oh, they saw it. They are probably frozen in fear. Kelth put another shot closer. Let us give them something to really panic about. The second plasma bolt fired, this time skimming within 50 meters of the hospital ship's hull, close enough that their shields, if they had any, should have flickered to life. Close enough that any competent crew would be screaming into their comm systems. Still nothing. Sir, Fixall said, her voice uncertain. Still no response. No hails. No distress signals. No shield activation. It is like no one is home. Oh, someone is home, Vexus said, standing again. They are just too terrified to respond. You know how humans are, probably huddled in their medical bays holding each other and crying about the unfairness of it all. He turned to his crew, spreading his arms wide. This, officers, is what happens when a species builds its military doctrine around being nice, around mercy and compassion and all those other useless concepts. A few nervous chuckles rippled across the bridge. Kelt, Vexus said, his voice taking on a darker tone. Stop playing games. Target their engines. Let us cripple them and then board at our leisure. I want to see the look on their faces when they realize their precious conventions mean absolutely nothing. Sir, are you certain we should? Kelt began. Fire. 3 plasma bolts hammered into the hospital ship's rear section, right where the engine compartments should be. The impacts bloomed across the white hull like flowers of destruction, scorching the pristine paint and sending debris spinning into space. The bridge crew erupted in cheers. Brenix was clapping his claws together. Fixall allowed herself a small smile. Even Kelth looked relieved, as if he had been worried for nothing. You see, Vexus declared triumphantly. Humans talk a good game about their military prowess, but when it comes down to actual combat they fold like cheap origami. That ship is dead in space, crew probably abandoning it as we speak, and we will be heroes of the Dominion for taking out a human supply line. He turned back to the viewport, ready to order the finishing blow. That was when he noticed something odd. The hospital ship was not tumbling. It was not venting atmosphere. Its engines were not flickering or dying. In fact, according to the sensor readout that Brenix was now staring at with growing concern, the ship's power signature had not decreased at all. If anything, it had just increased, dramatically. Sir, Brenix said quietly, his voice taking on a tone that Vexus would later recognize as pure undiluted terror. Sir, I think you should see this. Vexus walked over to the sensor station, irritation replacing his satisfaction.
What is it now, Brenix?
Are you going to tell me the ship is too damaged, that we were too effective? Brenix pointed at his screen with a shaking claw. Sir, the energy readings from that vessel just spiked. We are talking a 200% increase in power output, and it is not coming from their engine. Then where? Vexus began. That was when the silence broke. The alarm klaxon started screaming across the bridge of the Talon of Dominance, a sound that Vexus had only heard twice before in his entire military career. Both times it had meant someone was about to die badly. Energy spike. Brenix shrieked, his voice cracking like a hatchling's. Energy spike on the hospital ship. Levels are off the charts, I repeat. Off the charts. Vexus spun back to the viewport, and what he saw made every single scale on his body stand on end. The hospital ship was changing. Panels along its pristine white hull were sliding open, retracting into hidden compartments with mechanical precision that spoke of military engineering. And behind those panels, in recessed sections that had been completely invisible moments before, things were emerging. Large things, weapon-shaped things. Things that were beginning to glow with power signatures that made the Talon's own weapons look like children's toys. What in the name of the void? Vexus whispered. Sir, I am reading weapon systems, Brenix said, his voice climbing higher with each word. Multiple weapon systems. Point defense cannons, missile batteries, energy projectors, and something big. Something really, really big. Central dorsal section. Power draw is climbing to levels I have never seen outside of a planetary defense platform. Fixall's hearing ridges were flat against her skull, a Krell sign of absolute terror. Sir, we are being scanned. Active targeting solutions are being calculated. Multiple target locks acquiring. That is impossible, Vexus said, but his voice lacked conviction. That is a hospital ship. It is protected under human law. They cannot arm hospital ships. It is against their own rules. Well, someone forgot to tell them that. Kelth roared from his station. Because I am looking at enough firepower to level a small moon. On the viewport, more sections of the white hull were transforming. What had appeared to be simple cargo modules were rotating, revealing reinforced armor plating beneath. What had looked like sensor arrays were pivoting into position as point defense systems. The entire ship was metamorphosing from a peaceful medical vessel into something that made Vexus's warship look like a patrol boat. Evasive maneuvers, Vexus shouted, finally finding his voice. Get us out of here now. The helmsman, a Krell named Zortex, who had not spoken since the engagement began, worked his controls frantically. Sir, I am trying, but our positioning is terrible. We are too close. We have no momentum. And, I do not care about excuses, Vexus screamed. Move this ship. But it was already too late. The central dorsal section of the hospital ship, the area Brennix had flagged as the big problem, was opening. A massive armored hatch, easily 100 meters across, was splitting down the middle with the kind of heavy engineering that took years to design and cost more than most planets' gross domestic product. And rising from within that hatch, emerging like some ancient god of war waking from slumber, was a weapon that made Vexus's blood turn to ice water. Is that? Kelth began, his voice barely a whisper. A railgun, Brennix finished, his claws frozen over his console. A capital-class railgun. Sir, the power readings suggest that weapon can punch through our shields like they're not even there, through our armor like it is paper, through our ship like it is empty space. The railgun continued to rise, its barrel easily 50 meters long, built from some dark alloy that seemed to drink in the light around it. Capacitors along its length were beginning to glow, a soft blue at first, then brighter, cycling up through the spectrum toward white. Shields, maximum power. Vexus ordered, gripping his command throne so hard his claws dug furrows in the metal. All power to forward shields. Weapons, return fire. Target that railgun before. Sir, Thixal interrupted, her voice completely flat, emotionless, the tone of someone who had already accepted death. We are being hailed by the hospital ship. Vexus stared at her. They are what? They are hailing us, sir. Audio only. The message is, looping. Would you like me to play it? Yes, Vexus croaked. Thexal pressed a control and a human voice filled the bridge. Female, calm, with an accent that suggested education and authority. But underneath that calm was something else. Something cold and furious and absolutely, completely, terrifyingly done with the Krell's nonsense. Attention, Krell vessel. This is Captain Helena Voss of the UHMS Nightingale's Mercy. You have fired upon a protected medical vessel in violation of interstellar law. You have precisely 10 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction. This is your only warning. Voss. The message clicked off. Vexus looked at the railgun, now glowing white-hot with barely contained destructive potential. He looked at his crew, who were all staring at him with expressions that clearly said, "This is your fault." He looked at the chronometer counting down from 10, and for the first time in his long military career, Commander Vexus of the Krell Dominion understood what it meant to be truly, utterly, catastrophically screwed. The chronometer hit 0 and Vexus opened his mouth to give the order to surrender, to power down weapons, to do literally anything that might prevent what was about to happen. He was too slow. The railgun fired. There was no dramatic build-up, no warning siren, no final moment of suspense. 1 microsecond the weapon was charged and ready. The next microsecond a projectile was leaving the barrel at a significant fraction of light speed. The laws of physics did not care about dramatic tension. What Vexus saw was a line. A perfectly straight line of distorted space that connected the hospital ship to his own vessel. What he heard was nothing, because the sound had not had time to register. What he felt was the Talon of dominance lurching violently to starboard as something punched through it with the delicacy of a meteor strike. Then the sound caught up and the screaming started. Hull breach, decks 4 through 7. Brennix shrieked over the cacophony of alarms. Casualty reports coming in. We have lost. Oh stars. We have lost over 200 crew. The railgun's projectile, a solid slug of tungsten carbide alloy weighing approximately 2 tons, had entered the Talon's hull just aft of the bridge section. It had passed through the crew quarters, the secondary weapons control, the port side engine room, and 3 different corridors filled with personnel who had been running to battle stations. It had not slowed down. It had not fragmented. It had simply punched a perfectly circular hole through the ship and continued on into space, probably not stopping until it hit something several star systems away. The people in its path had not been killed, they had been erased, vaporized by the kinetic energy, turned into component atoms and scattered across the cosmos. Vexus gripped his command throne as the ship shuddered again. Systems failing, emergency bulkheads slamming shut, atmosphere venting into space. Return fire. All weapons return fire now. Kelth worked his controls with frantic desperation, and the Talon's plasma cannon spoke. Dozens of bolts hammered toward the hospital ship, a full broadside that should have overwhelmed any defensive system. Should have. The point defense cannons that had emerged from the Nightingale's mercy opened up with surgical precision. Streams of hypersonic projectiles intercepted every single plasma bolt, detonating them harmlessly in space. The white hull of the hospital ship did not even get scorched. No effect. Kelth reported, his voice breaking. Sir, their point defense is too accurate, too fast. We cannot land a hit. Then launch missiles, Vexus roared. Everything we have. The Talon's missile bays opened, and a swarm of 60 self-guided warheads screamed toward their target. Surely, Vexus thought, surely the point defense could not stop that many. He was wrong. The hospital ship's defensive systems switched targets with inhuman speed. More weapons emerged from hidden ports, these firing tight beam lasers that sliced through missile after missile with contemptuous ease. In the span of 8 seconds, all 60 missiles were reduced to expanding clouds of debris and unfulfilled potential. Evasive maneuvers. Vexus screamed. Zortax, get us out of here. Zortax's claws were a blur over his controls. The Talon of dominance began to turn, its engines flaring to maximum burn, trying to bring its armored bow toward the enemy while simultaneously building speed to escape. The railgun fired again. This time the projectile hit the Talon's starboard engine nacelle. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. The fusion reactor that powered the engine suffered a containment failure, and a miniature sun bloomed inside the Talon's engineering section. The explosion vaporized 200 more crew members, tore away a third of the ship's thrust capability, and sent the vessel into a violent spin. Vexus was thrown from his command throne. He hit the deck hard enough to crack scales, tasted blood, and scrambled back to his feet in time to see Brennix desperately trying to compensate for the spin. We have lost primary maneuvering, Brennix shouted. Hull integrity down to 40%. Life support failing on decks 8 through 12. Casualty count is over 500 and climbing. 500. Out of a crew of 2,000. In less than a minute. Surrender. Vexus screamed. Open all channels, broadcast our surrender, white flag, we yield, whatever the humans want to hear. Thyxol worked her console with shaking claws. Channel open, sir. This is Commander Vexus of the Krell Dominion warship Talon of Dominance. Vexus said, his voice cracking with desperation. We surrender. Cease fire. We surrender unconditionally. Our weapons are powering down. We are not a threat. Please stop shooting. For a moment, blessed silence fell across the bridge. The only sounds were the warning klaxons, the hiss of venting atmosphere, and the quiet sobbing of Zortax at his station. Then Captain Helena Voss's voice returned, and it was somehow even colder than before. Surrender, acknowledged Commander Vexus. However, I feel it is important that you understand exactly what you have done here today. You did not fire upon an unarmed vessel. You fired upon a hospital ship, a protected medical facility. You attacked doctors, nurses, and wounded personnel who were operating under the protections of interstellar law. The railgun began charging again, its capacitors cycling through that terrible rainbow of impending death. No, wait, Vexus shouted. We surrendered. You have to honor our surrender. Oh, I will, Voss replied, her voice carrying the kind of smile that promised pain. But first, you are going to learn a very important lesson about human medical vessels. We take the protection of our wounded very, very seriously, and when someone violates that protection, we respond with what we call proportional force. The railgun reached full charge. Consider this your education, Commander. Vexus closed all 4 of his eyes and prayed to gods he had not believed in since childhood. The railgun fired for the 3rd time. The 3rd shot took out the Talon's bridge shield generator, which was honestly a mercy compared to what it could have done. The projectile grazed the top of the hull, tearing away antenna arrays, sensor clusters, and the captain's personal escape pod, which Vexus had been eyeing with increasing desperation. The message was clear. You are not leaving. All weapons offline, Kelth reported, his voice hoarse. Shields at 6% and falling. Sir, we are defenseless. I know that, Vexus snapped, then caught himself. Yelling at his crew would not help. Nothing would help. They were at the mercy of a hospital ship, which was somehow the most humiliating sentence he had ever thought. Captain Voss, please. We have surrendered. We acknowledge our mistake. What more do you want? There was a pause, long enough that Vexus wondered if she had decided to simply finish them off. Then her voice returned, and this time there was no pretense of professional calm. This time Captain Helena Voss was angry. What do I want? What do I want, Commander? I want you to understand what you did. I want you to comprehend the magnitude of your stupidity. So let me educate you. Since your species apparently skipped the class on basic interstellar law, on the viewport the hospital ship had stopped its transformation. All of its weapons were tracking the Talon, but they were not firing. Not yet. The Geneva Conventions, Voss continued, biting off each word like she was chewing metal, are a series of treaties that govern the conduct of warfare. They protect prisoners of war. They protect civilians, and most relevantly to your current situation, they protect medical personnel and facilities from attack. Hospital ships are not valid military targets, ever, under any circumstances. This is not a suggestion, Commander. This is law. But you are armed. Vexus protested, gesturing desperately at the viewport. You have weapons that could destroy a fleet. How is that legal? Because we are allowed to defend ourselves when idiots like you decide to ignore several centuries of established protocol. Voss shot back. Hospital ships are protected, Commander, but that protection is not a suicide pact. We are permitted, under Article 35 of the Second Geneva Convention as adapted for space warfare, to carry defensive armaments sufficient to ensure our survival if attacked. The keyword here being defensive. Brenix looked up from his console, confusion mixing with his terror. But sir, that railgun is not defensive. That is a capital ship weapon that could level cities. Yes, Voss said, apparently able to hear them. Yes, it could. And do you know why we installed it? Because 3 years ago, a Krell raiding party much like yours attacked the UHMS Florence's promise. That hospital ship was not armed. It relied entirely on the protections of interstellar law. It was carrying 4,000 wounded personnel from the Battle of Kepler Station. The bridge went silent. The Krell raiding party boarded it, Voss continued, her voice dropping to something quiet and infinitely more dangerous. They executed the medical staff. They spaced the wounded, all 4,000 souls, and then they claimed it was a legitimate military target because the Florence had been treating enemy combatants. Vexus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He remembered hearing about that incident. High Command had celebrated it as a great victory. After the Florence massacre, humanity made a decision. We would continue to honor the Geneva Conventions. We would continue to operate hospital ships. We would continue to provide medical care to anyone who needed it, enemy or ally, but we would also ensure that no one would ever massacre our medical personnel again. So we armed our hospital ships, heavily, and we made very, very sure that everyone knew the rules. What rules? Vexus asked weakly. Simple ones, Commander. Do not attack hospital ships. Do not threaten medical personnel. Do not fire on vessels clearly marked with red crosses. And if you do, well then we are legally justified in defending ourselves with overwhelming force. You see, the Geneva Conventions protect us, but they also permit us to protect ourselves. You just had the monumentally bad judgment to test which clause apply. On the Talon sensors, new contacts began appearing. Vexus stared at the readings with growing horror. Sir, Brenix whispered. Sir, those are more Krell ships. It is the rest of our attack squadron. They must have heard the weapons fire and come to assist. 6 Krell warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons already charged, ready to avenge their sister ship. Oh no, Vexus breathed. No, no, no. Tell them to stand down. Tell them to retreat. Vexal worked frantically. Broadcasting now, sir. All frequencies, maximum power, telling them to withdraw immediately. But the squadron commander, a hot-headed younger officer named Craxus, clearly saw only what he wanted to see, a human vessel that had damaged the flagship. His response came back immediately, full of bravado and confidence. Talon of Dominance, this is Strike Group 7. We are moving to engage. Hold position. Reinforcements have arrived. You fools, Vexus whispered. You absolute fools. Captain Voss's voice returned, and now she sounded almost tired. Commander Vexus, I am going to give your friends the same warning I gave you. I hope they are smarter than you were. The hospital ship's weapons rotated, tracking the new arrivals with mechanical precision. The railgun began cycling again, but this time it was not alone. Missile batteries opened, Energy projectors came online. Point defense systems prime. In the span of 10 seconds, the Nightingale's Mercy went from hospital ship to flying fortress. Attention Krell Strike Group 7. Voss broadcast. This is Captain Helena Voss of the UHMS Nightingale's Mercy. You are approaching a protected medical vessel that is currently engaged in lawful defensive action against an aggressor. If you enter weapons range, you will be treated as hostile combatants and engaged with lethal force. This is your only warning. Craxus's response was to open fire. It was the last mistake he ever made. The Nightingale's Mercy erupted. The railgun fired, then fired again, each shot aimed with computer-guided precision. Missiles launched in coordinated swarms that overwhelmed point defenses through sheer numbers. Energy projectors carved through armor like surgical lasers through flesh, and through it all, Captain Voss's voice remained calm, professional, narrating the destruction like she was reading a grocery list. Target 1 mobility kill achieved. Target 2 catastrophic reactor failure. Target 3 magazine detonation. Target 4 structural failure amidships. Vexus watched his squadron die. Ships that had served the Krell Dominion for decades were reduced to drifting hulks in minutes. Some exploded spectacularly. Others simply broke apart, spilling crew and atmosphere into the void. One tried to ram the hospital ship in a last desperate act of defiance, only to be intercepted by a missile barrage that vaporized it before it got within a kilometer. 8 minutes after the engagement began, it was over. 7 Krell warships disabled or destroyed, thousands of crew dead or dying, and the Nightingale's Mercy still pristine white, still bearing its red crosses, floating serenely among the wreckage like an angel of death. This concludes today's lesson, Commander Vexus, Captain Voss said. I hope you were paying attention. The Nightingale's Mercy did not finish them off. In retrospect, Vexus would realize that was the cruelest part of all. Captain Voss left them alive, crippled and humiliated, floating in the wreckage of their own stupidity. She did, however, send over medical teams, human medical teams, who boarded the Talon of Dominance and immediately began treating the wounded Krell with the same professional efficiency they would have shown their own people. Doctors and nurses wearing uniforms marked with those same red crosses moved through the damaged corridors, stabilizing the dying, treating the injured and asking absolutely zero questions about why the Krell had attacked them. It was, Vexus thought as a human medic carefully set his fractured arm, the most humiliating experience of his entire life. You are lucky, Commander, the medic said in passable Krell. His name tag read Chen. Captain Voss considered letting you drift, but she decided that would violate the spirit of the conventions. Something about how medical personnel treat patients regardless of circumstances. How noble, Vexus muttered through clenched teeth. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, do not mistake mercy for weakness, Commander. The captain is letting you live so you can go home and tell everyone what happens when you attack a human hospital ship. Consider yourself a walking, talking warning sign. And that was exactly what Vexus became. 3 days later, after human engineers had helped repair the Talon's engines enough to limp back to Krell space, Vexus stood before the High Command Council. His arm was in a cast, courtesy of human medicine. His ship was barely functional, courtesy of human weapons. His crew was depleted, his squadron was destroyed, and his career was effectively over. Let me understand this correctly, High Counselor Threxus said, his voice dripping with disdain. You attacked a hospital ship, a clearly marked, obviously protected hospital ship, and it destroyed your entire strike group. Yes, High Counselor, Vexus said, staring at the floor. And you survived because the humans showed you mercy. Yes, High Counselor. The same humans we have been calling weak and soft for the past decade. Yes, High Counselor. Threxus leaned back in his seat, and Vexus could see the wheels turning behind those ancient eyes. The High Counselor was not angry about the defeat. He was angry about the implication. This changes things, Threxus said quietly. If the humans are arming their hospital ships, if they are willing to defend them with this level of force, then we have drastically miscalculated their resolve. We thought their adherence to these conventions was weakness. We were wrong. It is strength tempered by rules, and they will enforce those rules with extreme prejudice. The council chamber filled with uncomfortable murmuring. Effective immediately, Threxus announced. All Krell military vessels are to maintain a minimum distance of 10,000 kilometers from any vessel displaying human medical insignia. Any commander who violates this order will be court-martialed and executed. Is that understood? A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the chamber. Vexus was dismissed. stripped of his command and reassigned to a monitoring station on the edge of Krell space. It was a posting usually reserved for failures and cowards, which he supposed he now was, but he was a living failure, which was more than could be said for Kraxus and the rest of Strike Group 7. News of the incident spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The story grew with each telling, becoming almost mythical. A single human hospital ship had destroyed 7 Krell warships. The humans had weaponized Mercy itself. Their medical vessels were now the most dangerous non-combatants in known space. Other species took note. The Vraxian Empire issued new regulations. The Torvin Confederacy updated their engagement protocols. Even the notoriously aggressive Zethkar clans began giving human hospital ships a respectfully wide berth. A new phrase entered galactic military parlance: the Nightingale Protocol. It meant simple things, really. Do not attack medical vessels. Do not threaten non-combatants. Do not mistake humanity's commitment to rules of war for an inability to wage war. And most importantly, do not ever, under any circumstances, fire on a ship with a red cross. Vexus spent his remaining years at that monitoring station watching ships come and go, always scanning for human medical vessels so he could log their positions and ensure no Krell ship accidentally wandered too close. Sometimes, late in the night cycle, he would think about Captain Helena Voss and her Nightingale's Mercy. He would think about how easily she had destroyed his squadron, how calmly she had explained the rules he had broken, how mercifully she had treated his wounded despite having every right to leave them to die. And he would think about the fundamental contradiction of humans, a species so committed to saving lives that they had built the most terrifying defensive platforms in the galaxy to protect their healers. They were not weak, he realized. They never had been. They were just playing a different game, with different rules. And they were very, very good at it. 20 cycles later, Vexus sat in the observation deck of Station Outpost 47, watching a human hospital ship pass through his sector. This one was called the Florence's Promise, rebuilt and recommissioned after the massacre that had started this whole mess. It gleamed white against the black of space, those red crosses visible even at this distance, and Vexus felt his scales prickle with instinctive wariness. A young officer fresh from the academy stood beside him. The kid was eager, stupid in the way only the young and unexperienced could be. "Sir," the young officer said, "that is a human medical vessel. Should we not at least scan it, verify its cargo? They could be hiding anything in there." Vexus turned slowly, fixing all 4 of his eyes on the youngster. "No. But sir, regulations state." "Listen to me very carefully," Vexus interrupted, his voice low and hard. "You see that ship? That beautiful, peaceful-looking ship with its friendly crosses and its promise of healing? You stay away from it. You do not scan it. You do not approach it. You do not even think aggressive thoughts in its general direction. Because if you do, if you so much as sneeze in a way that ship interprets as hostile, it will reduce you to your component atoms before you can finish blinking." The young officer stared at him like he had grown a 5th eye. "The humans have a saying," Vexus continued, turning back to watch the Florence's Promise glide serenely past. "They say that their medical personnel take an oath to do no harm, and that is true. They will heal anyone, enemy or ally, without question or hesitation. They will risk their lives to save yours. They will show mercy when mercy is warranted." He paused, remembering plasma fire and railgun projectiles and Captain Helena Voss's cold professional voice as she narrated the destruction of his squadron. "But harm their healers, attack their hospitals, threaten their wounded." Vexus smiled, a bitter expression that held no humor. "Then you will learn that humans define harm very, very specifically. They will not harm you. No. They will simply defend themselves, with extreme prejudice, with overwhelming force, with weapons that make our best warships look like toys." The Florence's Promise disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the faint glow of its engines. "So here is your lesson, officer. Here is what they do not teach you at the academy. The humans are not weak. Their compassion is not a flaw. Their rules are not restrictions. They are promises. Promises that they will save lives whenever possible, and promises that they will end lives when necessary. The trick is understanding which promise applies." Vexus stood, his joints aching with age and old injuries that human medicine had healed but never quite erased. "Never touch the hospital ships, officer. Never. That is not cowardice. That is survival." He walked away, leaving the young officer staring out at empty space, probably thinking his commander had gone soft in his old age. Maybe he had. Or maybe he had just learned what the rest of the galaxy was still figuring out. that humans had turned mercy into a weapon, compassion into armor, and their rules of war into the most dangerous doctrine in known space. The Red Cross meant healing. It also meant, if you were stupid enough to attack it, that you were about to receive a very educational and extremely terminal lesson in the difference between protection and pacifism. Vexes had survived that lesson. Most did not, and that, he supposed, was the point.